The next day, as the scorching sunlight poured over Bailing City, signs of rising excitement began to stir within. The academy was divided into two parts, the Eastern and Western academies, and the competition between the two was intense. However, it must be said that competition fosters growth, and in these past 2 years, many excellent students have emerged. Among the various competitions, the academy trial, held every few months, was the most heated. The rankings within the academy were determined by the outcome of these trials. Young people, by nature, were competitive, especially when surrounded by many charming and beautiful senior students. Everyone wanted to stand out. So many of the students put in tremendous effort to achieve excellent results in the academy trial. In the Western District, there was a vast arena, resembling a gladiatorial ring. Numerous platforms were scattered across the field, and around them were layers of stone seating. These seats were now packed with a sea of people. Various conversations, whispers, and the sound of girls' tinkling laughter filled the air, creating an atmosphere full of youth and vitality. The large arena, crowded with people, was distinctly divided into two sections, the students from the Eastern and Western academies. Due to the competition, the two groups occasionally exchanged provocations, making the atmosphere even more lively. Only 4 of the top 10 in the Earth class are from our Eastern Academy, and the top 3 were all taken by the Western Academy. I wonder if this academy trial will bring any changes. Our Eastern Academy has some strong contenders recently. Lu Feng and Tan Qingshan are reportedly close to breaking into the spirit movement stage. If they succeed, they should at least make it into the top 5. At the Eastern Academy's seats, some students were conversing with each other. When Su Ling overheard, she sneered and said, "You all know the main point of this academy trial. It doesn't matter if our Eastern Academy has fewer spots in the top 10. As long as Brother Mu can secure first place, those guys from the Western Academy won't dare to be too cocky." The Eastern Academy students exchanged looks, then sighed. Indeed, what Su Ling said was true, but to win first place in the Earth class, they had to defeat Lu Yang. It was said that he possessed a mortal-grade spiritual vein. "Brother Mu, this time, our Eastern Academy is relying on you." Su Ling grinned as she looked at the young man in front of her. Mu Chen just smiled, his gaze fixed on the arena. Although the trial hadn't officially begun, some students were already sparring on the platforms. As Mu Chen was focused on the arena, a commotion suddenly arose behind him. Then, a fragrant breeze passed by, and a graceful, slender figure appeared beside him. A sweet voice followed, "Hey." Mu Chen turned his head to look at Tang Xun'er, who was dressed in a green outfit, her charming face framed by her dark hair tied into a lively ponytail. The sight of her immediately attracted many fiery gazes from the surrounding students. Tang Xun'er was a student from the Eastern Academy's heavenly class, and with her beauty and friendly personality, she was known as the Academy's campus flower. Wherever she went, she was the center of attention. "What are you doing here?" Mu Chen was slightly surprised to see Tang Xun'er, since students from the heavenly class were supposed to be training right now. "I came to cheer for you," Tang Xun'er said with a playful smile. "And if you end up getting beaten up, I'll carry you back." "Thanks in advance then," Mu Chen replied with a roll of his eyes. "Hey, do you think you can handle this? You had a conflict with Lu Yang yesterday, and I'm sure he's planning to cause trouble for you today," Tang Xun'er said, a hint of concern flashing in her bright eyes. Although she was teasing him, she understood the importance of today's event. Otherwise, she wouldn't have left her training to come here. "I'll do my best," Mu Chen smiled. Just as he was about to speak again, his expression suddenly shifted. He looked up and saw a cold gaze from across the arena. It was Lu Yang. Surrounding Lu Yang were Mu Yuan, Xuedong, and others, all of them giving Mu Chen provocative looks. Mu Chen and Lu Yang stared at each other from a distance, their eyes locked in an intense exchange, as if sparks could be seen flashing between them. Both were well-known figures in the two academies, and everyone knew that today's event would be a spectacle. Lu Yang stared coldly at Mu Chen from a distance, then shifted his gaze to Tang Xun'er beside him. His teeth clenched, and when he looked back at Mu Chen, his eyes were even icier. "Troublemaker." Mu Chen caught every subtle change in his expression. He then turned his attention to Tang Xun'er and said with a slight smile, Everyone knew that Lu Yang had feelings for Xun'er, but he had never received any favorable treatment from her. Sometimes, Chen wondered if Lu Yang's hostility toward him was not only because of the feud between their fathers, but also out of jealousy for how close Xun'er had become to him. "If you think I'm causing you trouble, I'll leave," Xun'er said, her face turning serious. Chen couldn't help but laugh. His dark eyes locked onto hers, and the boy's bright gaze made the girl's face flush slightly. Yet, her stubbornness prevailed as she continued to meet his gaze. "His words shouldn't be considered trouble," Chen said with a grin. "Himph, you're just boasting. Wait until you beat him first, then talk," Xun'er replied, pouting. Her beautiful eyes swept over the arena, and her expression suddenly changed. She whispered, "That guy, he's here too." Chen followed her gaze and froze. It wasn't just him. Even the entire Eastern Academy section fell into an eerie silence for a moment. In the Western Academy's seating area, several figures, around 17 or 18 years old, stood out. They were clearly older than the other Earth class students, and at the moment, they leaned casually on the railing, lazily watching the arena. Occasionally, they would chuckle mockingly, clearly unimpressed by the ongoing competitions. Among them, two figures drew the most attention, a boy and a girl. The girl wore a vibrant red dress, and her peach blossom-like eyes were incredibly alluring. She was none other than Hong Ling from the Western Academy. The boy standing next to her was dressed in white. He had a tall, well-built figure and striking features. At that moment, his gaze casually swept over the Eastern Academy area. Wherever his eyes landed, the previous noise from the Eastern Academy immediately quieted down, as though his presence alone had suppressed the atmosphere. "Ugh, it's Lu Mubai. I can't believe he's here too." Su Ling swallowed, his voice dry. If facing Lu Yang still sparked a bit of fighting spirit in them, then in front of Lu Mubai, they didn't even dare to think about challenging him. Chen's eyes locked onto the dazzling figure in white. Even from a distance, it felt as though an invisible pressure surrounded him. Their gazes met, yet there was no trace of fear in Chen's eyes, unlike the other students who were clearly intimidated. His calm stare seemed to surprise the white-clad figure, who raised an eyebrow in mild surprise. "Heh, that kid does have some guts," said one of the senior students from the Western Academy, noticing that Chen showed no fear of Lu Mubai. Hong Ling's gaze was fixed on Chen as well, her bright eyes studying the young man. His face was youthful, slightly immature, but there was an unshakable calmness about him. It was as if even the true first-ranked person could not unsettle him. She couldn't help but feel a bit dazed. The boy who used to be a little shy and timid following her back then seemed to have changed a lot. "Big brother." A voice came from nearby, and Lu Yang's face lit up with joy as he looked in their direction. Lu Mubai nodded toward Lu Yang, then leaned against the railing. He didn't speak much, but his presence alone seemed to sap the energy from the Eastern Academy's side, while the atmosphere on the Western Academy's side surged with excitement. Clearly, Lu Mubai was deliberately here to solidify the Western Academy's dominance. With his status, despite the Eastern Academy also having senior students, no one dared to challenge him. Boom. Just as Lu Mubai's presence was weighing heavily on everyone, a clear, crisp bell rang out, instantly snapping the students' attention to attention. The Academy trial was finally about to begin. The clear chime echoed across the sky, and the lively atmosphere below reached its peak. In the northernmost part of the arena, three figures sat solemnly. To the left sat Master Mo, the same teacher from yesterday. To the right was a middle-aged man with a gaunt face. "Heh, this Academy trial is even livelier than usual," said an elderly man with graying hair, seated at the main position between the two. He chuckled as he looked down at the intense atmosphere below. The Academy trials in the past were usually straightforward, but today's is quite unpredictable, Master Mo remarked with a smile. "What's so unpredictable about it?" Lu Yang is already at the initial spirit movement stage, and with his mortal-grade spiritual vein, he's certainly among the top, even in the heavenly class. Chen, though not bad, still falls short when compared to Lu Yang, said the cold-looking middle-aged man to the right, who was the highest-ranking instructor in the Western Academy. Naturally, he hoped for the best results for his students. Master Shi, underestimating someone who has earned the qualification for the Spirit Road trial might not be wise, Master Mo replied, his voice calm. Unfortunately, that qualification only applies to those who actually succeed in the Spirit Path trial, the middle-aged man said, shaking his head. The elderly man chuckled at the exchange, clearly used to it. His murky gaze turned toward the Eastern Academy's seating area, focusing on the lean young man sitting there. It's a pity. It's been over a decade since someone from the Northern Spiritual Realm has earned the qualification for the Spirit Road trial. Mu Chen was lucky enough to get that qualification, but he was kicked out halfway. He never experienced the final test. His year of training in the Spirit Road trial has been wasted, and he's lost a whole year of cultivation. Master Mo nodded, his expression tinged with regret. The Spirit Road trial itself didn't allow for cultivating spiritual energy, but if someone successfully passed the final trial, they would receive a powerful spiritual empowerment. In cases of extraordinary talent, it was even possible to break through to the Spirit Wheel stage, or even the Divine Soul stage overnight. Had Mu Chen completed the trial, he would have undoubtedly been the top youth in the Northern Spiritual Realm by now, and the spot for one of the 5 great academies would have been secured in his hands, with no one else even having a chance to compete. At that point, even someone like Lu Mubai would have to concede. But who could have predicted that things would take such a turn? Mu Chen not only failed to receive the invaluable spiritual empowerment from the trial, but he was also kicked out halfway, losing an entire year of cultivation. Dean Xiao, what exactly did Mu Chen do in the Spirit Road trial? Why was he expelled? I know this kid's talent well, and his temperament is excellent. There's no way he was expelled due to poor performance, Master Mo asked, his brow furrowing. He had heard that Mu Chen had caused quite a stir during the trial, but the details were unclear. At his question, even the cold-looking middle-aged man turned his gaze toward the dean, clearly curious as well. Dean Xiao stroked his beard, shaking his head with a wry smile. I'm not entirely sure, but I did hear that this kid caused quite a commotion during the trial, enough to attract the attention of the higher-ups of the 5 great academies. Master Mo and the cold middle-aged man were both taken aback, their eyes filled with confusion. They couldn't fathom what kind of earth-shattering event Mu Chen could have caused in the Spirit Road trial. Forget it. Let's not dwell on this. The bell has rung. Let the academy trial begin, Dean Xiao said, clearly not wanting to discuss it further, as he waved his hand. Master Mo nodded in acknowledgement, standing up. His gaze swept across the entire field, and his deep, resonant voice reverberated in the ears of every student. The time has come. The academy trial begins. Competitors, you will face off against each other. But remember, no killing. Understood? You all know the rules. The ones who step up have a single chance to challenge another, but only once, so choose your opponents wisely. Yes. The sea of students in the field responded respectfully. Very well, Master Mo nodded. With a wave of his hand, he signaled the start. Bang! As his hand descended, another loud ring of the bell echoed across the grounds, almost shaking the entire arena. Whoosh! Whoosh! The arena became lively as figures darted up onto the combat platform, and the sound of shouting filled the air. Lu Xiong, get down here. I've been itching to challenge you. Chen Tong, come out. Mu Chen watched the chaotic scene in the arena, unable to hold back a smile. However, most of these matches were quite ordinary, so he didn't pay much attention to them. His gaze would occasionally shift towards the direction of Lu Yang in the Western Academy. At this moment, Lu Yang was coldly staring back at him. Now, everyone knew that Lu Yang had declared he would choose Mu Chen as his opponent in the academy trial. As a result, no one dared to foolishly challenge Mu Chen first. Of course, the students of the Western Academy were also well aware that, with Mu Chen's strength, the only person in the Earth class of their academy who might be able to match him was Lu Yang. For these 2 most outstanding students from the Eastern and Western Academies, their match was highly anticipated. Mu Chen didn't pay much attention to Lu Yang's cold gaze. Instead, he occasionally chatted and laughed softly with Xun'er by his side. However, this behavior only seemed to irritate Lu Yang further, making him grind his teeth in frustration. The competition in the arena was quite lively, But what really drew attention were the students ranked highly in the Earth class. Generally speaking, only matches at this level could potentially change the rankings. That's Tan Qingshan from our Eastern Academy. He's making his move. Su Ling suddenly exclaimed with excitement. Mu Chen followed her gaze and saw a black-clad young man stand up and walk toward one of the combat platforms. The young man looked thin and pale, but his tightly pressed lips revealed a sense of determination. He said nothing and ignored the noise around him, as if he were deaf to it. Tan Qingshan, Mu Chen murmured as he saw the young man in black. He was slightly surprised. He knew Tan Qingshan, who had been the strongest student in the Eastern Academy's Earth class before Mu Chen arrived. Now, he was ranked among the top 5 in the entire Earth class. Tan Qingshan also noticed Mu Chen's gaze. He paused for a moment, then looked up and exchanged a brief glance with Mu Chen, his usually serious face breaking into a faint smile. Good luck? Mu Chen smiled back. Though he wasn't particularly close to Tan Qingshan, they were still fellow students of the Eastern Academy, and Mu Chen didn't dislike him. Tan Qingshan nodded, then leaped onto the combat platform. Many eyes turned toward him, as Tan Qingshan had gained quite a reputation in the Eastern Academy. I wonder who he's going to challenge? Some people whispered among themselves, their curiosity piqued. After all, only a few people from the Western Academy were considered worthy opponents for someone like Tan Qingshan. Lu Yang. Under the gaze of many, Tan Qingshan fixed his eyes directly on the figure of Lu Yang in the Western Academy. His calm voice sent a wave of shock through the crowd. He's challenging Lu Yang? The students looked at each other in surprise. Though Tan Qingshan was ranked highly in the Earth class, he was clearly no match for Lu Yang, who was much stronger. They couldn't believe he would dare challenge Lu Yang. Lu Yang, seated in the Western Academy section, froze for a moment. His expression darkened, and Mu Chen couldn't help but notice that no one had dared challenge him directly until now. Yet, here he was, the one being singled out. It made it seem like his reputation was no longer as intimidating as Mu Chen's. You're overestimating yourself? Lu Yang stood up, his ominous aura causing some of the nearby Western Academy students to shiver in fear. At this moment, Lu Yang was clearly a terrifying figure. With a leap, Lu Yang landed on the combat platform. He glanced at Tan Qingshan, then turned his eyes toward Mu Chen in the Eastern Academy section. His expression was neutral as he spoke. Are you trying to find someone to test me first? Without waiting for a response, Lu Yang lowered his gaze to Tan Qingshan and sneered. You think you're still the number 1 in the Earth class of the Eastern Academy? Tan Qingshan's expression grew serious as he met Lu Yang's gaze. He had once been the strongest in the Eastern Academy's Earth class, but now that title had passed to Mu Chen. Despite this, Tan Qingshan had never stopped working hard. He saw this challenge as a way to prove himself again, to reclaim his position as the top student. Tan Qingshan's hands clenched tightly. Deep yellow spiritual energy surged from his body, wrapping around his arms. A sharp, powerful aura began to emanate from him. That's spiritual energy. Su Ling and the others were astonished as they observed the energy wrapping around Tan Qingshan's arms. He's entered the spirit movement stage. Around the stands, many people let out low exclamations of surprise, their gazes fixated on Tan Qingshan in the arena. No wonder he dared challenge Lu Yang. He had advanced to the spirit movement stage. Impressive, Su Ling said, her face filled with admiration as she watched Tan Qingshan's retreating figure. Among the Earth class, only Mu Chen, Lu Yang, and Mu Yuan had reached the spirit movement stage, and now, Tan Qingshan was the 4th. Mu Chen nodded slightly. Tan Qingshan's rise to the top of the Eastern Academy's Earth class was clearly a result of remarkable talent. What was more important was that he did not come from a wealthy family, and all his achievements were earned through hard work. Mu Chen found himself with some respect for him. A person who earned pride through effort deserved respect. Heh, no wonder he's so bold. He must have broken through to the spirit movement stage, Lu Yang sneered, his expression turning cold as he assessed Tan Qingshan's aura. Tan Qingshan remained silent, but his gaze on Lu Yang grew increasingly sharp. His arms were enveloped in deep yellow spiritual energy, swirling upwards, emitting a heavy, pulsating force. Lu Yang's eyes grew icy and sinister as he stared back at Tan Qingshan. He extended his hand and made a slight curl of his fingers. Strike. Don't say I didn't give you a chance. So arrogant. Su Ling and the others cursed under their breath, clearly angered by Liu Yang's words. Boom. As Su Ling muttered angrily, Tan Qingshan stamped his foot heavily, and his body shot forward like a predator. His palms were wrapped in deep yellow energy, surging with immense power, and he aimed them straight at Liu Yang's chest. Humph. Liu Yang sneered, his cold eyes locked on the approaching Tan Qingshan. Without dodging, he clenched his fist tightly and delivered a powerful punch right into Tan Qingshan's palms. Bang! A deep, resonant sound echoed as a wave of air swept around them. The dust on the ground was immediately kicked up, and both figures staggered, but Liu Yang remained unmoved, while Tan Qingshan was forced to step back. Tan Qingshan's expression grew serious as he steadied himself. His arms were now glowing with an even more intense, deep yellow energy, his limbs resembling solid stone. Mountain Fist. Tan Qingshan charged forward again, his arms swinging with a slower but heavier force, like massive boulders crashing down. The surrounding spectators' expressions grew serious as they witnessed the tremendous weight behind each strike. Bang! 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 Tan Qingshan's fists pummeled forward with the speed and sharpness of rocks, each strike landing with force. Liu Yang, however, remained calm, his arms enveloped in fiery red spiritual energy like a blazing flame. He absorbed each of Tan Qingshan's attacks with ease. The clash of their energies created a gust of wind that swept across the arena, leaving the nearby crowd wincing from the sheer force. Tan Qingshan is truly impressive. He's managing to hold his own against Liu Yang. Su Ling remarked with excitement as she watched the intense battle. Tan Qingshan has just entered the spirit movement stage. It's probably not easy for him to defeat Liu Yang, Tang Xun'er commented, shaking her head. Despite disliking Liu Yang, she couldn't deny his strength. Tan Qingshan must be practicing the mountain art, which is a mortal-grade upper-tier skill. Liu Yang, on the other hand, might be using the yin-yang art, which is a spirit-grade lower-tier technique. Mu Chen observed, his gaze fixed on the battle. So, in terms of spiritual energy, Liu Yang has the upper hand. This situation may not last much longer. Su Ling sighed in disappointment. He clearly hoped that Tan Qingshan could win, as it would teach Liu Yang a lesson and perhaps temper his arrogance. As their conversation continued, the battle became more intense. Tan Qingshan's face flushed with a dark red hue, showing he had pushed his abilities to the limit. His attacks grew fiercer by the second. Whoosh! A punch, as hard as rock, shot out, aimed directly at Liu Yang's abdomen. However, just as the punch was about to land, Liu Yang suddenly stepped sideways, dodging the strike in a strangely fluid motion. Realizing his punch had missed, Tan Qingshan's heart sank. He looked up just in time to see the sinister smile tugging at Liu Yang's lips. Liu Yang's 5 fingers formed a palm as he suddenly struck out at an angle. Fiery spiritual energy exploded like flames, unleashing a scorching and forceful power that pierced through Tan Qingshan's defenses and landed heavily on his chest. Boom! The flame-like spiritual energy erupted upon impact, detonating between Liu Yang's palm and Tan Qingshan's chest. The immense force sent Tan Qingshan flying through the air before he crashed heavily onto the combat platform under countless gazes, a mouthful of blood spurting uncontrollably from his lips. An uproar erupted around the platform as the situation shifted in an instant. Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Tan Qingshan gritted his teeth unwillingly. Liu Yang's spiritual energy was domineering and blazing, far more powerful than his own. Swish! Liu Yang's gaze remained icy as he locked onto the battered Tan Qingshan. He had no intention of stopping. With a slight push of his foot, he shot forward like a hunting hawk, whipping his leg fiercely toward Tan Qingshan. Tan Qingshan barely managed to roll away, narrowly avoiding the strike. His face darkened. He hadn't expected Liu Yang to continue pressing him so relentlessly, even after gaining the upper hand. But he was stubborn. Liu Yang's aggressive pursuit only made him more unwilling to admit defeat. His eyes burned with defiance as he glared at Liu Yang. "Oh? Still got some pride in you?" Liu Yang sneered, shaking his head before a ruthless glint flashed through his eyes. His figure flickered, appearing at Tan Qingshan's right side. A scorching leg shadow swept through the air before slamming into Tan Qingshan's chest. Thud. Tan Qingshan's body skidded across the platform for over 10 meters, his throat clenching as another wave of blood surged up. But this time, he forcefully swallowed it down. Damn it! Do you have no shame? He's already lost, and you're still hitting him. The Eastern Academy students erupted in fury, their angry voices filling the air. That bastard! Su Ling cursed, his face livid. Hearing the insults from the Eastern Academy, Liu Yang's expression darkened further. Not only did he refuse to stop, but he strode toward Tan Qingshan and raised his leg for another brutal kick. Boom! A dull sound echoed. However, this time, Tan Qingshan didn't retreat, because right before him, a lean figure had suddenly appeared, and Liu Yang's ruthless kick had been firmly caught by a single hand. Mu Chen? Tan Qingshan stared at the familiar figure, momentarily stunned. You okay? Mu Chen turned to him, his voice calm. Tan Qingshan shook his head, but his gaze remained fierce as he glared at Liu Yang like a wolf bearing its fangs. You just entered the spirit movement stage and managed to fight him to this extent. That's already impressive. Give it some time, and catching up to him won't be difficult. Mu Chen smiled, his words measured. He understood Tan Qingshan well. His silent nature masked a stubborn pride. Telling him to surrender would only backfire, but acknowledging his strength instead gave him a sense of validation. Thanks. Tan Qingshan's tense expression eased slightly at Mu Chen's words. He glanced at the bright and confident smile on Mu Chen's face and murmured in gratitude, I'll leave this guy to you. But one day, I'll defeat him myself. He paused, then fixed his gaze on Mu Chen. You're stronger than me, so take back the Eastern Academy's top spot for us. With that, he turned and leaped off the platform. Mu Chen watched Tan Qingshan leave before finally shifting his gaze toward Liu Yang, whose expression had darkened. Now, I'll be your opponent. Liu Yang's lips curled into a sinister smile, his eyes gleaming with hostility. I'll make sure to give you a proper welcome. On the combat platform, the tension surged as the two faced off. The atmosphere turned razor-sharp, and countless students locked their eyes on them. This was the true clash of the strongest in the Earth class. Around the platform, countless gazes fixed on the two confronting figures. This is it, the real battle of the Earth class. In a corner of the Western Academy's seating area, a group of elite students observed the scene with intrigue. Mu Chen finally stepped up. I'm curious, can he really stand against Liu Yang? Even among the elite of the Western Academy's heavenly class, there was a spark of curiosity in their eyes. If it weren't for that inexplicable incident where he was expelled from the Spirit Road, Mu Chen's current abilities would likely be beyond their reach. In fact, even a genius like Lu Mubai might fall short in comparison. Thinking of this, they secretly glanced at Lu Mubai, but dared not speak the thought aloud. Upon hearing their words, the handsome young man merely smiled faintly, his gaze fixed on the slender youth in the center of the arena. Deep in his eyes, there was a hint of coldness. The selection for the Spirit Road always has some element of randomness, so sometimes mistakes happen. Perhaps the spot that should have gone to Lu Gu ended up in Mu Chen's hands by accident. After all, how else could he have been expelled? A youth, who clearly had a close relationship with Lu Mubai, sneered and said. The other Eastern Academy heavenly class students nearby also nodded with smiles. Although they didn't entirely agree with the sentiment, it was obvious that offending Lu Mubai, who was currently in the spotlight, just to defend Mu Chen, who had been kicked out of the Spirit Road, was an unwise choice. Who do you think has the greater chance of winning between them, Hongling? Lu Mubai smiled as he turned his gaze to the girl in the red dress beside him, whose long, captivating eyes shimmered with charm. The girl named Hongling stared intently at the match. Her gaze lingered on Mu Chen a moment longer. At this moment, the young man's figure had grown tall and straight, like a spear. The previous laziness that had defined him seemed to be gradually fading, replaced by a growing sharpness. The little boy from back then had indeed changed quite a bit. They're both at the initial spirit movement stage. Lu Yang practices the yin-yang art from your Lu domain, which is a spiritual grade lower-tier technique, while Mu Chen's father is a domain lord, so his spiritual arts are likely not ordinary. So, in that regard, it's a draw? Hong Ling's eyes danced, her languid demeanor making her even more captivating. But Lu Yang has a mortal-grade spiritual vein, and if he taps into it, his strength would be on par with the mid-spirit movement stage. As for Mu Chen, he'll have quite the disadvantage. Lu Mubai smiled at this and gazed at Mu Chen in the arena. Lu Yang is indeed capable. If Mu Chen loses to him, it won't be an injustice. But I'm actually quite curious. How did Mu Chen manage to qualify for the Spirit Road? Hong Ling glanced at him. It seemed that Lu Mubai also had some lingering doubts about how Mu Chen had secured a spot in the Spirit Road. Proud as he was, he had always believed that he was the most outstanding among the younger generation of Bailing City. Surely, the Spirit Road qualification in the Northern Spiritual Realm should have been his. Yet, the final result had surprised everyone. If he can't even get past Lu Yang, then the Spirit Road selection will truly be a disappointment. Lu Mubai spoke softly, his hand slowly tightening into a fist. The iron railing before him was deeply dented from his grip, and there was a chill in his eyes. He could not tolerate someone unworthy stealing the spot that should have been his. Mu Gu, you can do it. Mu Gu, bring back the first rank for our Eastern Academy. The students around the arena, from the Eastern Academy, cheered fervently as they watched the two young men facing off. In the past 1 or 2 years, the Eastern Academy had been completely overshadowed by the Western Academy, both in the Heavenly and Earth classes. Now, however, their Eastern Academy finally had someone capable of standing toe-to-toe with the Western Academy. A bunch of dreamers, Lu Yang muttered upon hearing their voices, a cruel smile spreading across his lips. He turned to Mu Chen with mocking eyes. I'm really curious to see their faces when you lose. In the face of his taunts, Mu Chen didn't show a hint of anger. He merely stretched out his hand, smiling faintly. You shouldn't overestimate yourself. Presumptuous. Lu Yang's eyes flashed with fury. His hands clenched tightly, fiery spiritual energy wrapping around his arms like flames. The next moment, he took a step forward, a faint thudding sound ringing out beneath his feet, and his body shot forward like a leopard. Boom. His fist, wrapped in fiery spiritual energy, shot toward Mu Chen, the pressure from his spiritual energy distorting the air with a strange screech. Mu Chen tilted his body sideways. As Lu Yang's fist whooshed past him, he struck out with his right hand, the dark spiritual energy coiling around his fingertips like a sharp blade, mercilessly slashing at Lu Yang's wrist. Mu Chen was relentless, but Lu Yang, as the first rank of the Western Academy's Earth class, certainly had some skill. He immediately transformed his fist into a palm, swinging it backward in a counterattack. Boom! A deep sound echoed as two streams of spiritual energy collided, and both individuals were forced to step back half a step. Do you want to see whose spiritual energy is stronger? Lu Yang sneered coldly, stamping his foot. His fiery red spiritual energy wrapped around his legs, and the overwhelming strength of his spiritual power was clearly much stronger than Tan Qingshan's from before. Swish! With his spiritual energy flooding into his legs, Lu Yang's speed surged, and his figure blurred, almost impossible to see. Using this speed, he unleashed an incredibly ferocious assault in an instant. Boom! 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 Lu Yang's somewhat blurry figure, like a fiery whirlwind, surrounded Mu Chen. Fists, feet, elbows, fierce attacks came one after another, accompanied by violent spiritual energy, overwhelming Mu Chen from all directions. The crowd outside the arena gasped. The students watched in shock as Lu Yang suddenly erupted with such a violent offensive. Tan Qingshan, who had been defeated by Lu Yang earlier, had a solemn expression. Lu Yang's spiritual energy was so much stronger now that it was nearing the mid-stage of spirit movement, and coupled with the spiritual arts he cultivated, his combat power was truly astonishing. Su Ling and the others' excited expressions began to fade, replaced with concern. Only now did they realize how formidable Lu Yang really was. Don't worry, Mu Chen won't lose so easily. Tang Qiner's beautiful eyes focused on the arena. After a moment, she smiled gently. With her mid-stage spirit movement strength, she could clearly see Liu Yang's speed. Though his attacks were like a torrential storm, there was a solid presence, like a stone pillar standing tall amidst the chaos. All eyes were fixed on the figure within the fiery whirlwind. Mu Chen either dodged or blocked every strike, effortlessly handling Liu Yang's ferocious offense, as if he could see through all of Liu Yang's hidden moves. Impressive. He must have gone through the spirit path trials, Xiao Din commented, a trace of admiration flashing in his murky eyes. Mu Chen has keen eyesight and a calm mind in battle. His temperament is no less than that of someone who has fought countless battles. Teacher Imo nodded, his tone full of praise. While weak spiritual power can be cultivated, such a strong mentality is not so easily forged. His eyes are indeed sharp, knowing exactly where Liu Yang's attacks are weakest. It's a clever use of skill to overcome brute force. But there's a saying, one strike breaks 10 deflections. His avoidance shows that his spiritual power is still inferior to Liu Yang's. Once Liu Yang channels all his energy into a single strike, Mu Chen will struggle, said the gaunt middle-aged man, called Master Shi, his voice cold and calculating. As instructors, they not only had great strength but also sharp insight. Xiao Din and Teacher Imo nodded in agreement. That logic was sound, but was Mu Chen really just evading? Within the fiery whirlwind, a muffled sound suddenly emerged. Mu Chen's hand shot out, his fingers like sharp daggers. Black spiritual energy coiled around them, piercing through the storm with lightning speed, striking Liu Yang's quick-moving figure. Boom! A dull sound echoed as the fiery whirlwind suddenly stopped. A figure staggered back 10 or more steps, the clothes on its shoulders shredded, clearly having been torn by Mu Chen's sharp strike. The crowd gasped even louder, their faces filled with disbelief. Students from both the Eastern and Western academies were shocked. No one had expected Liu Yang, who had been so fierce moments ago, to be suddenly pushed back by Mu Chen. You! Liu Yang's face turned dark, as if it could drip with water. He glared fiercely at Mu Chen, then took a deep breath. His right palm surged with fiery red spiritual energy. The red energy rose like flames, gathering in Liu Yang's palm. The spiritual power condensed rapidly, and it seemed to form a fiery sun the size of a palm. A violent wave of energy spread out slowly. The noise outside the arena began to quiet down. Many students watched in awe, sensing the tremendous power Liu Yang had gathered. Mu Chen stared at Liu Yang, his lips tightening, his eyes turning cold. He spun his hands, activating the great pagoda art. The black spiritual energy inside his chi-si began to stir, rippling out in layers of amplification. 1 layer, 5 layers, 10 layers. The dark spiritual energy coiled around Mu Chen's palm, and a domineering aura rippled through the air. At that moment, it seemed as though the violent spiritual fluctuations from Liu Yang were being surpassed. When the spiritual energy amplification reached the 13th level, Mu Chen did not stop there. Having grown more proficient in the great pagoda art during this time, he knew that the limits of its amplification were far from over. Mu Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze as sharp as a blade. Boom! In his chi-si, a faint buzzing sound echoed, and Mu Chen's body suddenly trembled. 18 layers. The dark spiritual energy erupted violently from Mu Chen's body. The overwhelming force of this energy instantly suppressed Liu Yang's spiritual power. Such overwhelming spiritual energy. A hint of surprise flashed in the eyes of Xiao Din and the others. The level of spiritual energy Mu Chen exhibited was already nearing the mid-spirit movement stage. They could also sense that the dark spiritual energy emanating from Mu Chen carried a domineering intent, something that ordinary spiritual arts couldn't achieve. Mu Chen, you're seeking your own death. Liu Yang's face shifted from shock to fury. He let out an enraged roar, stepped forward, and immediately, fiery red light spots began to appear all over his body. These spots scattered across his form, faintly resembling a unique network of meridians, like long serpents soaring through the air. Spirit vein? A new round of gasps erupted from the crowd around the arena. To their shock, Liu Yong had been forced to activate his spirit vein.